What are you typing out? Some hard-hitting questions?
Uh, no, it's just like you can type what's happening. Hang on. Can't tell if it worked or not. Oh, here we go. And then if I go.
Hi, Facebook.
Do you see it?
No, but there's like a 30-second delay, so you start talking to Facebook now. It'll catch up with you in about 30 seconds. Hi, Facebook. It's
Yeah, no,
Lowry.
I think we're on, but I don't hear you anymore. And I hear myself echoing.
You do. I don't hear you echoing.
Okay. Where are you? I think we're.
You see me on Zoom?
No, I can't find you on.
Yeah, there we are. I see us on Facebook. Facebook,
You do? Okay.
we're on there. I see it. It's happening.
Okay. Hi, everybody. I can't find you, brother, but oh, there you are. Okay. We're still on. Hey, everybody. It's Lowry, and I'm here on Zoom with my wonderful, sweet brother, whose name is Jake Minton. Hi, Jake.
Hi, everybody.
And, we used to talk like this occasionally because for many years after college, you lived in Chicago, and you don't anymore. You live like 4 minutes down the street, and that makes me so happy. Just so happy. You have no idea. And Jake and I sometimes together during this COVID thing. We see each other sometimes in the backyard and swim with the girls and wear our masks sometimes inside together. But his girls are going to bed, so he's home. And anyway, this way we don't have to wear our masks while we talk. So thank you for joining me on Zoom. And
yeah,
I have to just show this. Here's a cute picture of us. Oh, you
Ooh.
This is
got my nice parted hair.
This is when you were an actor and playwright in Chicago, and I was always so proud to come see you there. And look, I got this off my wall. So we were cute. I'm older, but Jake is wiser. So that's one of the reasons I'm glad you're here.
Lowry is braver.
Oh, no. Okay, yeah. So let me ask that question first. I have lots of questions I want to ask you, but I also want to just turn it over to you to say whatever you want to say about talking with children about race, because it's something you've done before with your kids and with your students.
Sure.
But my first question is, you were together with me that weekend. We were all together. It was breaking our first COVID quarantine the last weekend of May, and George Floyd had just been murdered before together
just
at
like a couple days before. So
yeah, we were together at the lake house with our parents and our family, and it was our little vacation together. But we kept looking at our phones and checking Facebook, and that was when all the protests were just happening in every city, and we could tell this is huge, this is big. And well, I just want to say, that was emotional for all of us. And occasionally when the kids weren't around, we were able to talk about it and process it. And I'm not sure why, but you know this about yourself. People like to come to you to process things. You have friends that call you. You had friends calling you that weekend to help process what was happening because they were feeling pain and I would say hopelessness too, and anger. it was I'm thankful that I had you there to help talk about it, and mom and dad, you helped all of us talk through it. Can you think of anything? Can you think of what our thoughts were and how you helped us process it then?
Um, well, I mean, I think we were all struggling to find ways to process, what was happening, and certainly recognizing that like this isn't new, but what feels new this time is there seem to be a lot more people paying attention, and maybe it's because of the way that it happened, in the order that it happened, in the middle of a pandemic where everybody's stuck at home watching the news, and has time to pay attention to things in ways that they haven't, in the middle of a pandemic that's exacerbated some of the problems of race in America already. So we've already been keyed into the fact that unemployment is disproportionately affecting Black people and people of color. Many of our underpaid essential workers are Black people and people of color, and there are medical disparities that disproportionately negatively affect Black people. So we've been, as a nation, I think, starting to see all of that. I mean, it's been visible for a long time, but more eyes on the problem maybe than ever before. So more people were having that conversation. And then remember that thing happened with the Black man who was bird watching in the park, in Central Park, and asked the woman to put her dog on the leash as she was legally supposed to do, and she threatened his physical safety by way of saying, "I'm going to call the police and tell them that a Black man is threatening me in the park," right? And so we saw that video, and it was just this very, very on the nose, blatant example of a white woman threatening a Black man's physical safety and even his life. And the weapon of choice was, "I'm going to call the police." Something that's happened many times before, but it was just so on the nose. And I think Trevor Noah gave the monologue that week of just this was just so clear. And then we saw the George Floyd tape, and it was also just so clear. There was no question that this was just a murder. Just a callous, careless, uncaring, not careless, but uncaring, intentional lynching, right? So and then everybody was just sitting at home. And so we were processing all that stuff. And I mean, I don't really know how if I helped you process it. I don't know how. I just try to
that's the weekend I was thinking to myself, what is mine to do? And you and I both know Tracy Brown, and so I get that phrase from her, and I just love that concept of
that's right.
What is mine to do? And I was starting to kind of talk about it a little with you guys. The idea of maybe I'm supposed to do something, and you guys knew that I was on the verge of wanting to enjoy a little more free time after retiring from teaching. So my sense was you were hesitant for me to jump into anything, not just because you were nervous for me and my time, but I think, am I right? You were nervous because I was a white woman. I am a white woman. You were nervous for me to do it. So yeah, what were your thoughts on me starting it? And then as it's come about, what are your thoughts? I mean, I was nervous too, but I didn't know what would happen.
Well, Yeah, and I think that was right. And I was nervous for you because I was like, you are very excited and passionate to do something about this. You want to help in some way, and I can see that your intention is very good and clear, but you're jumping into something that you don't understand yet. And I feel, and where you and I differ, is that I like to try to become an expert on something before I make forward motion on it, which usually ends up becoming a process of I just keep going deeper and deeper down the rabbit hole of learning, and I don't ever actually take much forward action.
Okay.
So I like to teach myself a lot of things with generally the intention of moving forward on that stuff, but I don't always get to the moving forward place. And you were just like, I got to do something now. And I was scared for you because I think that was against every instinct I have, which is just like, I would sit and learn everything I could before I tried to do anything. And you were like, no, I got to do something now. And honestly, I have to give you big compliments. I mean, I just think that's been one of the strengths of this site and you curating this site with Danita and all of the other moderators is the grace with which you are navigating the fact of you don't know everything and you're learning all of this stuff as you go and you're asking questions and you're taking notes really well. You're like, I think I was watching you and Tracy and Danita talk on one of these calls, and Tracy gave some sort of note about like white people need to stop acting surprised when they hear how stark this information is. And like in that moment, you like changed your face from to like, I'm gonna stop, got it. I'm taking the right, like, but you like, do you know what I mean? You're making all of the mistakes that well-meaning white folks make when they're like, I care and I want to do something, so here I come. And like, I mean this as a real compliment. We're like watching you, Lowry, make those mistakes in real time in a really pure-hearted, purely intentioned way.
Yeah.
And it is for the white folks on the page, I speak only for myself, but I can imagine that for others it's comforting to see you walking bravely through that space of being willing to ask questions, being willing to maybe sound stupid when you don't know why something is the way it is, and being willing to like learn and grow and show your growth as we go, and to admit that you don't know this stuff and that you want to do something, but it's great. And it's inspiring to somebody like me whose instinct is become an expert before you try to throw your hat in the ring, so that you don't risk looking stupid.
Okay.
You know what I mean? And I think that's like that's my internalized fear. Like, I don't want to speak on something until I know what I'm talking about. But the other thing that we're learning all the time, just in this national conversation, is like we have to be willing to make mistakes, and we have to be okay with that. And perfectionism is a remnant of white supremacy as well. Like this idea that I have to get it exactly right comes from the same places as these lies of white supremacy and patriarchy and all of these things of just like you have to be perfect or you will be judged. That fear of judgment is an honest, legit fear of something that people will do to us, but the people that will do that to us are the same. It comes from the same place as the lie of white supremacy and the lie of men are better than women and the lie of whatever is better than whatever. So it's okay to muddle forward, making mistakes as we go, improving as we go, getting better as we go, knowing that perfection is not attainable and that it's and that it's more about growth and positive movement and action. So I really appreciate watching you do that, because it helps me get off my butt a little bit. So, good job.
Well, thank you, Jake. I I have told my moderating team early on when there was.
Tracy says, sorry, I just wanted to say Tracy's watching. She said, contrary to popular belief, there is life after mistakes. Yes, it's true.
Good. Oh, thank you for watching that. I wanted to say, I'm gonna mute you while I'm talking, and I'll do that for myself too. I wanted to say, I told early on when it was difficult, and there was difficult feedback happening too, and I know that's gonna keep happening, and I'm okay with that. I told my team, I'm willing to be that bumper in front, getting beat up and making the mistakes and learning on behalf of all the white people who are trying in this. So I appreciate this group, all the people in the group letting me be that. And I think I've made it clear I'm not an expert, but definitely, learning along with everybody else. So thank you. And Jake, as you're talking, am I muted? No, I'm not. About you mentioned the big lie. So I would love for you to just launch into the big lie and how that came about, and what age you were teaching when you decided that you wanted to put something together. I'm curious when it was, like when in our national movement of things happening, when was it? Why was it then that you decided to do it? And how did that all come about? Thank you.
Okay. Well, Tracy Brown said something else smart on here. Thanks, Tracy. She said, Black people learn that even when we are right, even when Black people are right, anyone white can say we aren't. So we, Black people, are much less socialized to strive for perfection. Yeah. Being gaslighted as a rule by white folks makes you, I guess, feel like perfection isn't the goal, because it's not, because the rug is going to get pulled out from under you anyway. So yeah. Yeah, that's good. Okay, so I decided to teach it to kindergartners because I happened to be a kindergarten teacher at the time, and I decided I wanted to teach it and it was worth teaching. And if I'd been a second grade teacher or a fifth grade teacher, I would have said, okay, I'm doing it with those kids. But because I was a kindergarten teacher, I was like, well, this is important, and we have a big social studies unit that isn't filled out. We don't really know what we're doing with the social studies unit. So we're a team of 3 kindergarten teachers. And I should say, I'm still at the same school, but I teach middle school theater now. But my team, my kindergarten team was awesome. And the woman who replaced me when I moved to the other job this past year is also awesome. It's an awesome team. And so I took the idea, we were talking about social studies idea, and it was I think it was after.
Was it after Trump was elected?
I can't. Maybe it was.
I think you were starting to talk about it before then. I'm just curious, what made you think it's time to do this? Like for me, maybe it was about the same period. It was just everything that was happening during the election.
Oh, well, no, I know what happened. My school sent me to a conference, which is a conference, an independent school conference called the People of Color Conference. And it is primarily a conference. It started off as a conference that was intended to be an affinity space and a safe space for Black teachers who taught at private schools, which even more than public schools in America are an overwhelmingly, statistically speaking, overwhelmingly white spaces. So Black teachers and teachers of color that teach at private or independent schools typically have, in many cases, find themselves in the situation of being the only fill in the blank at that school, which of course can be an incredibly isolating experience and can come with all sorts of the pitfalls of microaggressions and people just being ignorant, and sometimes people being willfully ignorant, and sometimes people being outright, bigoted. So the People of Color Conference was started as an affinity group space for Black teachers and teachers of color from all across the country that were independent school teachers. And it grew.
You kind of stuck.
Huh?
So you kind of stuck.
Yeah, well, it grew over the years to get bigger and bigger and bigger, and then to become a place where white teachers that teach at independent schools, like I do, would go to get educated about what those concerns and issues are, and about what we can do to be supportive allies and advocates and accomplices. I think there's definitely some tension, and this was a few years ago when I went in that space of like, there's a lot of white people here at the People of Color Conference. And this was designed to be this thing. And we're happy that these folks are here and they want to learn and they want to be advocates and they want to become better anti-racist teachers. But there's a tension, and we need to acknowledge that there's a tension here. White folks, you don't get to go into every one of these meetings. Some of them are just for us. So, and which is super important. And while we were there, we were encouraged to, and I definitely did encourage to participate in our own affinity spaces. So they had affinity spaces for white teachers. They had affinities, and it wasn't all teachers, just school people. Affinity spaces for Black teachers, affinity spaces for Latinx teachers, affinity spaces for biracial, affinity spaces for mixed adoption teachers, like teachers that were Black and teachers of color that have been adopted by white families or things like that. So they had lots of great, where there are special concerns, and you just want to share with people who you can relate to about, like, oh man, I am so white and I stepped in it so bad today when I said this thing to this guy, and I feel so bad, and tell me I'm not a bad person. And then the other white people around you say, oh, that was about done it before too. Like things like that. So it's important to find moments like that. And it's important, certainly for at the People of Color Conference, for sure, for the Black teachers and the other teachers of color to be able to say, like, we're in a room without any white people in it right now. Let's talk, right? So it was an incredible experience. It was life-changing. I learned so much. I still keep all of the notes from all of the sessions I went to on my thing. And so that was what happened. I went to that conference and I came back, and that spring I was like, we got to teach this stuff. We have to start early, and we got to start teaching some stuff. So kindergarten or not, let's teach the history of, let's teach some real Black history in a way that we think is kindergarten appropriate. And I think we also, we're brave enough to say, like, we are going to figure this out as we go, and we might make some mistakes, but we're going to do our best to try to figure this out.
So tell us how it came about, because you call it the big lie, and I feel like that is so helpful. What is the big lie? What did you say on day one with the kids?
Yeah. So the big lie is ultimately the way is the language that I use to describe the idea of white supremacy, or the idea that white people are better than black people or any other kind of person. That is a lie, and that it's such a lie, such a disastrous, harmful lie that we've given it its own big name, and it's called the big lie. And so I wanted to teach the kids how did that lie start? Where did it come from? And how was it used to hurt people? And why? How did it work? So I think in order and I think this is what we find for ourselves today, and for ourselves as adults, and especially when we start to see adults that are just like, I don't get it. I don't get what the problem is. Like, I think one thing that we start to understand is, if you will let me take you back to the beginning of time and explain it from there, and explain through the origins of chattel slavery in the colonies and then America, and through the transatlantic slave trade, like if you'll let me take you all the way back to the beginning and bring you all the way to here, you will not be able to deny that systemic racism is still here, is still hurting people, is still in place, is still affecting folks, and is still here. It's still living up here. It's not gone yet, right?
Connected.
Yeah, it's all connected. And so one of the things that makes it easy for people to ignore that, or to say, no, it's over. We got the Civil Rights Act has passed and everything's equal on paper, and I don't know what anybody's complaining about anymore. And if folks would just do what the cops say, and everything would be fine, and everybody gets opportunity in this country, and you can either take it or you can complain, right? Like, when folks say that stuff, I just want to be like, let me grab you by the throat and drag you back 200,000 years and walk you through what happened on this planet, and then in the founding of this country, right? Because once we start to see all that stuff, it's like, it's undeniable. You just have to be willing to hold it all in your head at once and connect the dots, which admittedly is very complex work. It takes a lot of time and patience and willingness to be like, okay, I'm gonna learn this lesson, and then I'm willingly gonna sit and learn this lesson, and I'm gonna seek out the knowledge of this lesson. And if folks don't want to do that, then you can't do it. So
You're right, it's complex, but I'll say, I mean, I'm coming across wonderful children's books.
Yeah.
Are teaching me so much. And I mean, like, I read one yesterday to my kids, and I was like, oh my gosh, that makes so much sense now. It connected all these generations,
Yeah.
and it helps you understand the history. So there are things out there that can help put it together. So there's no excuse not to try.
Right.
And I think you would probably say that, and I just want to tell everyone, your curriculum you put together, as you presented it, might be better for older kids, but take what you can. So don't just think this is for kindergartners.
Sure. I definitely don't think it is.
I
And
40-year-olds, I think adults need to learn about the big lie. So whatever
yeah.
you're telling us, I think it's great for all ages.
Yeah. And, I think we did it for 1 year that way. And then we made some adjustments, thinking like, oh, that was a lot for kindergarten. Like, let's adjust it and do some other things. So, but the other thing is, like, what's the danger of teaching a 5-year-old about quadratic equations? There's no danger. They're going to get what they like about, like, if you try to explain something big to them in a way that is accessible to them, they're going to get some, and some of it won't land, but you've started a conversation, and learning is a process, and Black history is not a unit, right? It shouldn't be taught in one grade level during 1 month of time. It needs to be taught to every age, always repeated and deepened and layered as you go. So the worst danger I think that we faced in kindergarten was like, maybe they're not going to get some of this stuff. That's fine, right? Because then we've laid some groundwork for like, well, and they're going to ask questions, and then when their next teacher that touches on this stuff brings it around again to them, they'll have some foundational knowledge that they can pull back from, and they can say, oh, I remember learning about that, and now this is starting to click. Right?
But Jake, I want to say, I don't think you're assuming teachers are going to teach that stuff. I don't believe that I was taught that stuff.
Well, sure, and we weren't. Yeah, I wasn't either. So that's the sea change that I think needs to happen. Mm-hmm. Students need to be learning all of this stuff over and over and over again, right?
Can I go backwards with you for a second?
Yeah.
So I know recently.
Tracy says, if you can make it age appropriate for a 5-year-old, that's probably about the level that most adults need to hear it. Not trying to insult anyone, but right. But it's true. Like we need a simplified version first that is understandable, that we can hold all at once. So I'll try to walk you through that in a minute. Of like, that was my goal, was like, I want to figure out how to tell this story of where it started. And with 5-year-olds, I felt like it's important to include, why do people have different color skin in the first place, right? So the story doesn't start 400 years ago. The story needs to start 200,000 years ago. And I need to get you all the way through the whole thing, right? So you can divide it up into little sections, but that's one of the big questions, is like, why is our skin a different color anyway?
Yeah.
And it's important, and I think it's important for grown-ups to hear that too.
Yes.
Right? So.
Yeah. Okay. So I want to hear the story. And Jake, is it all in some kind of document that you'd be willing to share with other teachers and parents?
It is. It's not yet. I mean, it exists in a lot of notes between me and my co-teachers and things that we did, and we chose books to be our read alouds as we walked through the curriculum.
But you can maybe type it all up for us.
It's definitely something I would like to do. So I'll make that. That's mine to do, is to try to figure out how to document.
But here's what I want to go backwards with. First of all, you're an amazing storyteller, and it's something that you've done from your days as a kid with your Lego men, and then you became a playwright and storyteller. And then you became a teacher and storyteller. So it's how you worked with the kindergartners. And I know it got into their hearts and minds, because recently, with everything that's happening with Black Lives Matter now, you had a parent send you some kind of note about her child's response. And it was something they learned in your class. What was that response?
They were asking about why. I think they were asking about, they were hearing the story from their parent about George Floyd and the police officer that killed him, and my former student from I guess from last year said, referring to the police officer, oh, he believed the big lie, right? So like, she understood, like, oh, he believed the big lie. And I had another parent mention to me one time, she said something about, she was talking about history, and she said something about somebody being a slave, or talking about slaves. And her daughter corrected her with the language that we had taught the kids. She said, no, Mom, you mean enslaved person. She was an enslaved person, which is something that I got from other teachers, that was like, it's really important to talk not about slaves and slave owners, right? But to say enslaved people and enslavers, right? The slave owners gives the impression of like status, and enslaver is like, no, we're talking about a bad guy, right? We need to make sure that, you know, this is somebody who was doing something to another person, and that was an enslaved person. So just making sure that we get our language right is important.
Plus the idea that they are a slave makes it sound like it's an inherent
Right. It's an intrinsic quality of the person. They are a, yeah, but it's not true.
being done to them.
Right. Something that is being done to them. Yeah.
Okay, so yeah, talk us through the big lie. I'm also thinking about how I know your students care so much, and I don't remember the terminology you use with them, but care so much about protecting one another. And so maybe that terminology comes up when you talk about the big lie. And anyway, I want to, like, I remember, and this is tricky, a little bit off topic, but you and I, obviously, I think it's obvious to probably everyone by now, we're upset, very upset when Trump became our president. And you and I both were teachers at the time, and we knew that we had colleagues that didn't feel the same way we did, and we knew that we had parents and students that didn't feel the same way we did, but we had to show up the next day and teach. And a lot of us teachers went through that horribly difficult time. Tracy, you're watching. It was, you were with me the very night before, and we had no idea how things were going to turn out. So I remember you saying something, and I think it helps with this conversation too. Somebody, a kid asked you if you were sad or something about it, and you said something about how it's our job to stand up for people.
Yeah. Well, so I mean, you know, I had kids that I knew some of their parents voted for Hillary and some of their parents voted for Trump. And so some of them were excited that day and some of them were very sad that day. And all of them were inheriting their emotions from their parents because all of them were 5 or 6 years old. So it had been explained to them what was happening. And some of them understood some of the issues at stake, but when you're 5 or 6, your parents pretty much set the table on how you're going to think and feel about things, right? And then that lasts and lasts and lasts. So, and I didn't want to alienate anybody in my class. I love all my little 5-year-old Trump supporters, right? And I love their parents. Like I can love their parents and vote differently than their parents too. And if we get into the nuts and bolts of things and if we happen to have disagreements on human rights issues, then I will stand my ground and I will speak my truth. But I will, so whatever. So it's important to me that all of the students in my class feel safe and loved, right? And so I'm not gonna go political on them, but some of them could see that I was sad. And we talked a little bit, and I also didn't want to lie to them, right? So if they said like in the lead up to the election, they would maybe say things like, well, Donald Trump is mean to women because they'd heard some of the things that he'd said, or they'd heard some of the things like that. And so I would try to reflect back to them what they were saying in a way that confirmed that they were not telling lies, or no, you shouldn't say that. You know, it's like, yeah, I've heard some things too that make me feel that way too. And I worry about that a lot. That must make you feel concerned, you know, things like that, right? But I'm not trying to be CNN for them, and I'm not trying to do any of that stuff, right? So the day after the election, some of them were upset, and somebody said, you know, this is terrible. What are we going to do? This is going to be the worst thing ever. And I said, look, every president that has ever existed in this country has done things that are good and things that are bad. Every president ever, including the one that we're about to say goodbye to, has done things that hurt lots of people and things that help lots of people, right? And I think it's really important that we get out of our tribal political bubbles, right? And own, right, that like Barack Obama like hurt people, right? And it's and that's okay to say. It's okay to say that there was a war where innocent people died while Barack Obama was the president, right? It's important that we don't stick to our politics so hard that we can't challenge what is right and what is wrong, no matter who's in that house and who's in that office. So what I said to them is, every president that's ever been a president has done things that hurt people and things that help people. And our job as grown-ups, this is the grown-ups' job, is to, when the president is doing something that helps a lot of people, say, yay, thank you, we like what you're doing, please keep doing more things like that, that's really working. And when the president's doing things that hurt people, say, stop, we need you to stop, and we're gonna speak up and call you and send letters and talk to our senators and other people that we vote for and tell them we need this to stop. It's our job to hold you accountable for the things that hurt people and to thank you and to encourage the things that help. So that's what's going to happen now is with any new president, the grown-ups are going to do our best to hold that person accountable for the things that are hurting and to encourage things that help. You know, and then I went off and cried in the break room.
That is so helpful to me again right now. And you said that to me that day. That I went to get a hug from you that day. Yeah. And we cried together and then pulled ourselves together. But yes, that is so helpful. And I just think the whole helpful versus hurtful and right versus wrong is so important for teachers and parents to hold fast to and not be afraid to talk about it that way, because
Right.
Teachers are afraid to get political, but you're right, that is not political. And I just love that. And that's how kids can understand it. Helpful versus hurtful. I'm so glad you said that again. Thank you.
Right. Well, and it's like, I mean, it speaks to the thing that Ibram Kendi teaches us, which is like, there's no such thing as a race. I don't know if he says this exactly this way, so I'm certainly definitely paraphrasing, but there's not racist people and anti-racist people.
Yeah.
There are actions that are either racist actions or anti-racist actions. So you can be a person who goes out and does 17 anti-racist actions in a row, and then you go back home and you do some stuff that's in your standard comfort zone and you're not paying attention. You're not paying attention to the fact that, like, oh, the juice that I bought at the store disproportionately affects people of color because of the way that it's harvested. And, you know, like, it's just what are the effects of my actions? And you have to set your intention clearly and know that you're going to fail and that it's very difficult to achieve perfect anti-racism. It's impossible to achieve anything perfect, right? But to have like I was 0 for 10 on racism today. I got all my actions were perfectly anti-racist today, right?
Yeah, but
so
I understand, because it's like we talked to them about a good choice or that was a good choice you made. So we make racist choices or anti-racist choices every day. Okay, right. Back to the big lie. Thank you for that.
Okay, so basically what we try to do is we start, and I have a globe in my hand when I talk to them, but I just talk about my very antique, outdated globe. I was going to say, I think it still has the USSR on it. No, it has Russia. But I remind them, you know, where we live on the globe. And so we find Texas and we point to the United States. And then we try to talk about time. So what we cover in the first lesson is like some geography and some massive expanse of time. and the basic ideas that are in evolution, which is that evolution is change that happens very slowly over many, many, many generations and many, many thousands, right? So so the way I start the story is by telling them, like, did you ever wonder why there are lots of different colors of skin on people? There's this color skin, and then your color skin's a little bit different than my color skin, and so we all look at our skin and we talk about skin and we talk about what that's all about, and we do an individual lesson on melanin, right? So like any of those children's books that cover stuff about skin you're in and melanin, and Bella Hooks has a great book about it, and you've shared them. Yeah, there it is. But just kind of describe, like, here's what's happening in your skin, right? And here's why it's different colors. From a very, like, this is today, this is people that you meet in your neighborhood have different colors of skin because they have different amounts of melanin, right? What I wanted to do is try to describe, like, how did that happen? And because I'm just definitely a science nerd, I'm just like, I really want the kids to dig this, because I dig this. So we would try to start, so we'd say, like, the scientists' best information about when the very first people came about and when they first lived and where they first lived tells us here, sort of right here in the center of this giant continent, Africa, where today you have countries that are called Kenya and Somalia and things like that. This is a very old globe. It still says Somaliland on it. It's cool. But right here in Central Africa, right? And that's where the very first humans evolved. And that was about 200,000 years ago. That's a long, long time. That's 200 years ago times 1,000 years. 1,000 times, if you count it to 200 years, 1,000 times, that's 200,000 years ago. And the very first people evolved from other species that weren't quite human beings, but they were starting to get there. They were standing up and walking, and they starting to use tools. And the very first creatures that scientists would agree those were human beings lived here 200,000 years ago. And they lived there for about 150,000 years. They didn't go very far from this spot for about 150,000 years after they first came about. Because, think about it, there weren't any cars, there weren't any airplanes, there weren't any boats, there weren't any spaceships. You couldn't go very far. And if you wanted to go anywhere, you had to walk there, right? And so these folks were learning how to be human beings. They were the very first ones. So they were learning how to catch food and how to kill animals that might be dangerous to them. And they were learning which plants and seeds and things were safe to eat. And they were doing all of this stuff, and they were learning how to be families, and they were learning how to do these things that were very important for humans to learn. They were doing all of that very important learning right here. And you'll notice this line on my globe that goes right here. It's not really there on the Earth. You can't see it. It's invisible, but you can see it on the globe. It's called the equator, and it's the center of the Earth, of the globe, from where the North Pole is up here and the South Pole is down here, the coldest spots. And the center that goes right through the middle is the equator. That's the hottest place to live. So if you live anywhere along the equator on the globe, that's the hottest place to live. And that's because it gets the most sunshine of any other place on the globe. If you go up this way, it gets a little colder and a little bit darker. If you go down this way, it gets a little bit colder and a little bit darker. But if you live near the equator, that's the hottest place to live, which is great because people. Oh, are you talking? Oh, okay. Which is great because you can find lots of good, healthy food in places where lots of good, healthy food grows, where it's hot and warm and lots of good stuff grows. So that's a great place for people to get their start. There's lots of good food there. And also one of the most, you get lots of vitamins and minerals and nutrients from your food, but one of the most important vitamins that we get is a vitamin called vitamin D, which we all need. And vitamin D is something that we get from, one of the main places we get vitamin D from is from the sun. When the sun hits our skin and our eyes, we absorb this vitamin called vitamin D into our bodies, and it helps us stay healthy. So we really, really need vitamin D. And so one of the things scientists tell us is that the earliest humans started to shed their hair off their arms because their skin became more absorbent of vitamin D that way. Their skin started to figure out, oh, I can get more vitamins out of the sun if there's less hair on it. So that was great. They got less hairy, which is why we look like we have smooth skin on our foreheads and on our hands and on our necks and things like that. But what it also meant is there's something bad that we get from the sun too, because we get good vitamin D from the sun, but we get something bad from the sun too. And the kids know, oh yeah, you get a sunburn. I'm like, yeah, you get a sunburn, right? And especially where it's very sunny, you get a sunburn. So the other really smart thing that our skin did on these very, very first people is it started to create its own sunscreen. And that sunscreen is something that's inside all of our bodies, and it's called melanin. And melanin is what you think of anytime you see anything that's brown, any shade of brown on your body, that comes from melanin. So the brown pigment in our skin is melanin. And melanin is nature's sunscreen. It protects us from getting sunburned, which helps us not, stave off things like skin cancer and other things that can make us sick. Right? So the first people basically had this perfect skin that was perfectly designed to absorb the correct amount of vitamin D and to protect them with this natural dark sunscreen called melanin from getting burned by the sun. It was the perfect skin for living in that place at that time. It was beautiful. The way that it worked, it was just the best kind of skin to have. You got the right amount of vitamins and you didn't get the sunburn. It was great. Well, as I said, people lived here for about 150,000 years after they first developed. And then they started to, their population started to expand and they started to go in different directions. Now, of course, they were walking. They didn't have cars or anything yet. Hi, Ellie. And they were walking. So some of the folks would go this way and some of the folks would go this way. And remember, it takes a long time. So they would maybe say, the way that it worked was like some kid would say, oh, I'm going to move out of my parents' house because I'm tired of living with my parents. And I want me and my family want to go live somewhere else because we don't want to live with my parents anymore. So they would move, maybe over to the next mountain so they could still go visit their parents if they needed to help them or, do things like that. They could still go see them. They could walk back in a day, right? But they would go live over here. And then maybe their kids would say, I'm going to move a little further away from my parents. So it wasn't like, they're like, I'm going to walk as far as I can right now, right? It was like, well, we're going to spread out slowly. And my grandchildren are going to live a little further. And their grandchildren are going to live a little further. Their grandkids are going to live a little further. And so over thousands of years, the human population started not just to live here, but to live in more places throughout this continent. And then eventually to start to travel on foot to others that they could walk to. And at that time on the earth, you could walk to every place on the earth. Yeah. They were cycling through ice ages, and we were in the middle of a big ice age, which means a lot of the water was trapped in ice, which means there was less water in the ocean, which means you could walk all the way from what we now know as Russia to what we now know as Alaska. You could walk across this thing that's called the Bering Strait because there was a land bridge there. There was land and you could walk there. So people walked there and people walked everywhere. And that took place over lots of different thousands of years. But guess what happened? When people got out of Africa, now listen, a lot of people stayed in Africa because they thought this is a good place to live and we don't need to go anywhere. This is a great place to live and our skin is perfect for this place and everything's great here and everything's good. But other people wanted to go different places because people are like that. They want to go everywhere. They want to go to different places. So some people ended up further north Well, guess what they found out thousands of years later when they ended up living up here? It's not as hot up here. It's hotter down here near the equator. But when you get up here, not only does the sun tilt away, the earth tilts away from the sun sometimes, so it doesn't get as much sun. Sometimes it's even cloudier up there. So you get more clouds and you get more rain. It depends on the weather up there. You might not just get as much sun in a day. Well, that was fine. Their skin had all this beautiful melanin in it, and they had lots of sunscreen in their skin. Then their skin started to figure out, we're not letting the sun in, but guess what? There's not nearly as much sun now. So it's like we're putting on way too much sunscreen, and we don't need all of the sunscreen, which isn't really a problem. It's okay if you put on too much sunscreen. Nobody gets hurt if you put on too much sunscreen, right? Except if that sunscreen is built into your skin, it means that you stop getting that good thing that you need from the sun. Remember what that good thing is that you get from the sun? Vitamin D. So if your skin is blocking all the sun, which is good, except if it's blocking all the vitamin D, because there's not as much sun, then you're going to start to get sick. You're not going to be as healthy, right? So skin of the people that go up to these colder places that don't get as much sun starts to say over generations, you know, somebody's kid, somebody's grandkid, somebody's next kid, the grandkid after that, starts to lose a little bit of the melanin so that their skin can absorb the vitamin D that the sun is giving them through those cloudy skies and that limited amount of sunlight. You can still get some vitamin D out of the sun. That's how you end up with skin that looks like mine, which can absorb a lot of vitamin D. But if I go to one of those places where there's lots of sun, I'm going to get a really bad sun because I don't have enough melanin to protect me from very, very, very sunny places, right? So
that is awesome, Jake.
Over time, you can imagine that if there's people, if there's people living here and there's people living way up here where there's barely any sun at all, but there's also people living a little further south where there's a little more sun, a little further down where there's a little more sun, a little further down where there's a little more sun, in different places, eating different kinds of food that start to change the way that their bodies grow and learn, discover that people living in lots of different places ends up becoming people with lots of different colors of skin, right? Lots of different people with lots of different colors of skin. But all the people that live right here have the same beautiful dark brown skin. And all the people that live up here have this very pale, light colored skin like me, so they can absorb as much vitamin D as possible because they need it to be healthy to live up here. So it's not like there's lots of different colors of people everywhere you go. There's just a kind of person that lives here that has this color skin because this is the right color skin to have if you live in this place. And there's people that have this color skin up here because this is the right color skin to have if you live in this place. Remember, we're still talking over 20,000 years ago, before there were cars or boats or airplanes. And if you wanted to go anywhere, it took forever. And people didn't travel for fun or work or entertainment. They only went as far as they needed to go to get food and shelter and be with their families, which means people stayed put. And if they decided to move, they would move a little further away from their family, but it wouldn't be a very big move. Right? So people are staying put, and people are staying, and they're having families that all have the same color skin as them because they all live in that same place, and they're having babies with people who live in that place. And so everybody who lives there has this color skin. Everybody who has this color skin, right? So that's how all of these skin colors came about all over the world. And it took basically 170,000 years for all of those skin colors to come out the way that they did. It took a long time. Well, then that's kind of part one, right? That's how we get the skin color thing. So then we talk about
Uncle Jay.
Go ahead.
I learned from that. No one ever talked me through it that way before. I mean, only recently have I even got pieces of that. So that was fabulous. And would that all be in one day? Just
Say again?
would that all be in one lesson, like the skin color, or you would focus on that for like a week or? Oh, I'm cutting out.
Yeah, so that would be, and that would certainly be a full day, and we would revisit it, and we would do a couple of exercises. Oh, sorry. I'm gonna try something.
Okay.
Are you there?
Yeah.
Okay. I'm gonna connect with you. I'm gonna maybe switch over to my iPad real quick.
And also I realize that it's 9 o'clock now and we're just at the beginning of the big lie. Well, we're not even to the lie yet. Oh, I see your face. So what do you, I am so, shall I get rid of you there? I see two.
Yeah, I'm gonna come off here.
Okay, awesome. So, I mean, I'm still engaged with you, but do you want to like do this series? Because that was like an awesome first lesson.
Yeah.
What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, it's not so like it's not the kind of thing you can sit down and just like, I don't mind going further with you, but we can also come back and do it again later. But like with my kids for sure, like it wouldn't be the kind of lesson I would try to teach all in one day. You know, it would be like, remember the other day when I told you about how everybody ended up with different colors of skin all over the world? Well, now we're going to learn about how those people met each other and what happens. So, you know, like we would do that in a couple of different lessons. But the basic fundamentals, because I don't want to leave you or anybody hanging, of the big lie is you're going to do stuff. I mean, this is all the stuff that's in like Stamped from the Beginning and the stuff and all the books on the invention of whiteness, right? The invention
Of that concept that you
of
are
that concept of races. Yeah.
being.
Is the basics that we try to explain to the young kids are like, and you don't want to leave out, I think it's important that you don't leave out First Nations, Indigenous Americans when you tell this story, right? So you don't want to start with like, look, there were colonists that came over from Europe and they had skin like mine and they were trying to grow sugar. And it was a really lucrative, you know, it was they could sell it for a lot of money, but it was really hard to grow. Right? You don't want to skip over like, there were people here and they were here first. Right? This is important that we don't leave that part out. So I think when you're telling the story of like, how did Black people become enslaved in America, you got to start with, well, how did white people get to America? So but in order to do that, you got to be like, well, what happened to the people that were already here? Yeah. So even though we're telling the story of Black history, it's like important to say there were folks. So this is why I talk about the Bering Strait. I'm like, remember those people that I said they walked all the way across this thing and now it's water? You couldn't walk across it anymore. And then they lived all over the place. And I name as many tribes as I can think of the names of their nations. I was like, you know, there were Lakota people and Chippewa and Kickapoo and Choctaw and Cherokee and you know, all kinds of different nations, different cultures of people living. Some lived here, some lived here, some lived here. Some were farmers, some were hunters, some did both. Some lived in big buildings, some lived in teepees so that they could pack them up really fast and follow the buffalo because they wanted to eat, you know, they hunted the buffalo and used them. And so they needed to live in a kind of a house that they could grab and pack up very quickly. Some people stayed put because they were farming, and so they lived in different kinds of houses. They were smart people. They knew exactly what they were doing, and they knew how to do it really well. And they lived here for a long time. And then some folks that have my color skin came from this part of the world called Europe, and they came on boats, and they had things called guns, and they came over here and ended up killing a lot of these people for many different reasons. One of the reasons is that they thought they were better than those people. They thought that because they had guns and they had big boats and they had fancy shoes, and these people lived differently, but these people knew exactly what they were doing, and they knew exactly how to live right here. They knew the perfect way to live right here. And when these people came from somewhere else, thinking that they knew better than the people who had been living here for a long time, it got very dangerous for everybody. And the people with the guns were able to kill more people than the people without the guns. Doesn't that make sense? So that's something that happened. And I try not to like minimize it or skip over it. And I want to say, like, I want to go back and we're going to talk a lot about these people that lived here, because this is a really important story to know too. And those people still exist, and it's important to still learn from them. But a lot of them are gone.
And how does that tie into the big lie? And those people with this skin color thought that Faye was better, and that was a lie.
Yeah. And so the lie that I talk about there, and I don't get into skin color an entire amount, like a giant amount right there, because I don't think that's exactly, I mean, I'm sure it happened all over the place in all different kinds of places, right? But that's not the moment I'm trying to pinpoint to them as the invention of the big lie about color, one color being better than the other. So the lie that I would tell them there is, like, they believed they knew better because they had some things that these people didn't have. But what they didn't realize is that these people had lots of things that they didn't have. And these people had lots of knowledge and wisdom that they'd fought for many, 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 many hundreds and thousands of years. They knew how to live here. And the lie that these people believed, because they had boats and guns and some fancy things like that, because they had that fancy stuff, they believed that they were smarter too. And they believed that they knew better. But it's not true. People live differently in different places, and that's okay. And you need to learn from the people that know what they're doing, that have lived there for a long time, right? So the lie that I tried to teach them about that was like, you ain't better because you got more stuff, right?
There's so much good stuff. Okay, so I think we should continue this conversation, and there's so much that I even just want to talk with you personally, but what stood out to me, and I think anybody watching, was how wonderful it was that you were saying that it was the perfect skin. It was the perfect skin for that place. And the skin was smart, and it was just what they needed, and just all of that. I mean, it's just stuff that I'm thinking about how that transforms a white mind, but also how a person with that skin color would hear that in that way, maybe for the first time from a white teacher.
Yeah.
And how that would be so affirming in a way they don't even get that it's making that connection.
Yeah. Well, and one thing that there's a study from a guy, I want to say his name, hang on, Orlando Patterson, 1971 study. He was an anthropologist and professor. I think he was at Harvard. And we're going to wrap it up here, but he said he did a big study, and his findings kind of pointed to the two lenses through which you can teach Black history. And one is the catastrophic lens. Okay. Let's name all of the terrible things that were done to these people. Okay. And one is the survivalist lens. Let's look at how these people overcame that catastrophe and fought the odds and survived. Let's look at the survivors. And a combination of lenses is certainly necessary, but what he discovered in his study was that white students respond more to learning through the catastrophic lens. What was done to these people? Look how unfair this was. and that Black students really need a big dose of the survivalist lens of which points out like these people exercised their agency and you also have agency, right? Which is important. And so, but it's also important in that conversation about perfect skin and things like that, right? And how, and I think it's important to just let to just say that the scientific truth of like, look, the first people were right here in Africa and they were Black, right? And we are all descendants of them and their skin was perfect and we've all come from that. And our skin changed to this color,
Wow.
not because this is a better color, but because we were getting sick and dying because we needed our skin to do something different because we went to this cold place, right? So,
I mean, just starting with that is transformative. Just starting with that.
Yeah. But the teaching a combination of the catastrophic lens and we haven't gotten to the big lie yet in slavery, but I thought this was fundamentally important to understand as a teacher, and I think as a parent this is important too, that white kids respond to learning about Black history through the lens of catastrophe, through the lens of injustice. And it's important for them to hear those survival stories too. And it's really important for Black students to hear those survival stories because those are stories that can connect me as a Black student, as a Black young person, to my own sense of agency by identifying with somebody like Harriet Tubman or Frederick Douglass or somebody who beat the odds, right? But it's really important for white folks not to hear those stories too much,
yeah,
and feel like, well, all of these people got out, so that's the narrative of slavery that I'm internalizing, is people escaped from slavery when they decided they didn't like it anymore, right? It's like, no, that's not what happened, right? Millions and millions and millions and millions, right?
That plays into the false white narrative that everything's okay, and now we can celebrate our Black heroes 1 month a year.
Right.
Ever have to talk about the big sin of our
right.
It's founded on.
And it ties into that that modern day white narrative of like, well, let's look at Black exceptionalism and examples of people who are millionaires and billionaires, and let's talk about Oprah, and let's talk about Michael Jordan, and let's talk about Barack Obama, right? There's not a problem in this country because look at these three people that I just named, right? So if we teach too much, and now we're going back to slavery, but if we teach slavery through a survivalist lens to white students and white adults, we risk oversimplifying how simple it was to get out of slavery, right? It wasn't, for millions, it was not a possibility.
Yeah.
Ever. So it's important, and it's really important not to oversimplify. And I know we're talking about teaching 6-year-olds, but like, it's important to like balance all of that stuff carefully and to pause when you're losing them, and to make sure that you're not going to places that they can't follow you and that they're going to get too confused. But so you got to spend a lot of time on it. So like with my own kids, we like, Lincoln is our 5-year-old daughter, and I can tell when she's checking out. So like when we're talking about stuff, I can tell like she's done. She finished 2 minutes ago. I'm going to stop and we'll come back to this another day, but we will come back to this, when she's got a little bit more energy. We're not going to just be like, oh, well, I tried to have a 10-minute conversation with her and she checked out after about 8 minutes. So we gave it a shot. We tried to cover Black history. I'll let our teachers take over from here. No, we got to come back around, right? So.
Well, and Jake, I think, okay, yeah, I can't wait to talk to you again. I'm sure everybody is excited too for the continuation of the big lie.
Yeah.
But
well, and what I would tell my kids too is I would say, like, because I knew this would be a multi-day process, so I'll do this with you. I would say, guys, we haven't even gotten to the big lie yet. Do you think you know what the big lie is going to be? Oh man. I tell you, when I teach you about it, you're going to be angry and you might be sad and you're going to be so frustrated, but I can't tell you about it today because we're out of time. But I promise I will tell you what the big lie is next time.
Oh, I love it. I love it. That's so good.
So then they would come in like the next day. They'd be like, "Are you going to tell us about the big lie today? You're going to tell us about the big," because they really wanted to know, right?
Okay, and I know we'll also get to, I mean, because there are heroes in this story too, and that's a big part of your storytelling and how we can all help each other. And also, I do want to hear more about how you've talked to your own kids about it and how you get through or get over being a white man doing it and why you think that's important. I think your TEDx talk that you did about gender and seeing students seeing windows and mirrors of different genders roles in teachers plays so well with this too. And so the windows and mirrors and why we need more Black teachers too. There's just so much that we can talk about. So thank you, brother. We will set a date. And
Okay.
also it brings me back to one more thing I wanted to say. At the beginning of our conversation, we talked about how you don't have to be an expert. You don't have to be perfect to have the conversation. So I think that is like the biggest lesson for teachers and parents is that if you haven't started the conversation yet, this fall is time to start the conversation, no matter what age and stage your kids are at, no matter what age and stage you as an anti-racist and teacher or parent are.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's important to normalize the event of receiving a question from a kid and saying, "Ooh, I don't know the answer to that, but let me find out for you. Let's find that out." And if we don't have time to find out right now, I'm going to put it on the list of things we're going to find out this week, and we're going to find that out. So that I can help answer that question, but I don't know right now, right? Or to come back in the next day and be like, I told you something that I thought that I knew, and then I was reading more about it, and I told you something that was wrong, and I want to fix my mistake.
Yeah,
that's important too.
Well, you are awesome. And I'll talk to you soon and we'll go back and look at the comments and answer some more questions, but we will do this at least one more time to finish, go to our next piece of the big lie. But also I want to just at some point talk about why did we grow up to care about this? I'm just curious. We've never even discussed it that much. So we'll get into that sometime too, but I love you.
I love you too.
And thank you everybody for watching. Have a good night. Thank you, Jake.
Oh, Tracy hung in with us the whole time.
Oh, Tracy.
Tracy, you're the best. We're very honored to be in the same space as you. Thanks for everything.
Brave space. Bye, Tracy. Bye, Jake. Love you.
Bye, everyone.